Welcome to the Commentary Magazine Daily Podcast. Today is Tuesday, November 26, 2024. I'm John Podhoretz, the editor of Commentary Magazine. Quick programming note, we will not be having shows Thursday, Thanksgiving, or Friday, the day after Thanksgiving. You will have to soldier on without us. Go back into the archives to listen to great episodes past. Catch up with us on our YouTube channel where you can watch these podcasts now every day. And if you do that, I would really appreciate it if you would like and subscribe. The subscription number is very important for us to catch the eye of the YouTube algorithm and have it spread the news and gospel of the Commentary Magazine podcast far and wide to audiences that will maybe enjoy it the way that you do. So that would be a mitzvah you would do for us, and I would really appreciate it. And so would my colleagues, executive editor Abe Greenwald. Hi, Abe.
Hi, John.
Media commentary columnist Christine Rosen. Hi, Christine.
Hi, John.
Brain fart there. And Washington commentary columnist Matthew Continetti. Hi, Matt.
Hi, John.
Okay, so something very peculiar is going on, and you're going to have to give me a couple of minutes to dilate upon it. Today, sometime after we do this podcast, Benjamin Netanyahu, the Prime Minister of Israel, will be addressing the nation in Israel and explaining why it is that Israel is apparently agreeing, and the cabinet that he oversees is agreeing to a ceasefire plan in Lebanon with Hezbollah. This is on the surface a peculiar thing for him to be doing. Israel is engaging in a strictly defensive action in Lebanon, though aggressively, to destroy Hezbollah's capabilities, to destroy its infrastructure, and to take out its command, control, and communications. Among other things, for example, the other day, it found a 3.5-mile tunnel from Lebanon into Syria. It turns out it happened in October, but we only heard about it a couple of days ago, destroyed it. So obviously there is a great deal of underground infrastructure in parallel to the underground infrastructure that we know that Hamas had in Gaza. This has been an extraordinarily successful operation, though costly. 140 Israelis have died, which is a very high casualty number for a country as small as Israel. But all available evidence is, aside from all of the remarkable things that happened, like the pager operation and the taking the elimination of almost the entire top directorate of Hezbollah. The goal, very simply, is to move Hezbollah north of the Litani River. That's 18 miles from the Israeli border, to have its weaponry moved north of the Litani River if it's not entirely and completely destroyed, and to therefore bring a measure of peace to northern Israel, where 60,000 residents are still living in temporary shelter after a year and a month, 13 and a half months since Hezbollah began bombarding Israel. Hezbollah began bombarding Israel on October 8th. Hezbollah has fired thousands of rockets into Israel. Hezbollah has made the north of Israel uninhabitable to its residents. And so this effort is to pacify that area and make it possible for Israelis to go on with their normal lives. The ceasefire deal that is being agreed to, that was being negotiated by, among others, Amos Hochstein, an American envoy, has about it it's a 60-day process in which there's a ceasefire for 60 days. Hezbollah is supposed to move all these assets north of the Litani River. The Lebanese army is supposed to come south into the area where Hezbollah was, to control it and contain it, to keep Israel safe. And according to what Netanyahu says, Israel will have the right to strike at any moment, at any time, if it sees any aggressive efforts, any rocket is fired from Hezbollah, any troop movements south of the Litani River toward the Israeli border by Hezbollah rather than retreats, all of that it reserves the right to absolute action at any point. The ceasefire is not impregnable, it is conditional. And those are the terms. It's not rational for Israel to be agreeing to this, because it is on the advance, it's on the offensive. Its purpose is, as I say, entirely defensive. It has no interest in controlling Lebanese territory, though I think part of the idea was it would probably have to occupy some of those 18 miles below the Litani River that it occupied from 1982 until 2000, before it unilaterally withdrew, precisely to prevent terrorist cross-border actions. The failure after that unilateral pullout in 2006, Hezbollah got frisky, and Israel had to go to war with Hezbollah for 34 days until an agreement was signed, overseen by the UN, that UNIFIL, a UN force, was going to patrol and protect the border and keep it from becoming a hostile area. And guess what happened? UNIFIL works with Hezbollah. UNIFIL is part of the overall, just like UNRWA, just is part, either turns a blind eye or is actually an open part of the Hezbollah military structure or command structure. And so Israel has had no protection from the international agreement that it signed to lead to a ceasefire in Lebanon in 2006. Why am I going into this detail this way? Because Bibi Netanyahu told the Israeli cabinet last night what I assume he is going to tell the Israeli people when he speaks later, after this podcast is over. And here is paraphrased by Moti Kastel of Channel 14 in Israel. Here's a paraphrase of what he told the Israeli cabinet. The ceasefire agreement is not ideal, but there is a real danger that the United States will impose a unilateral decision on us in the UN Security Council to halt the war. On one hand, there would be sanctions against us if we do not stop, and on the other, we would have no freedom of action in case of violations. If that happens, we will end up with both a ceasefire and no agreement. Therefore, if we can delay the inevitable by 2 months and secure an American commitment to respond to any violations, that is certainly better than the alternative. Netanyahu's explanation for why Israel has to agree to the ceasefire is that the outgoing Biden administration is willing to go to the UN Security Council and go to war with Israel and vote against it, or organize the Security Council to vote against Israel to impose a unilateral ceasefire. I'm dumbfounded. We can talk about this strategically, tactically, morally. This is the end of the Boyd Biden. Okay, so I've finished my monologue. Please, Matt.
But why? I want you to continue to monologue and answer this question. Why are you dumbfounded by this? I mean, isn't it just part and parcel of the Biden administration's gradual drift toward kind of opposition to Israel's self-defense?
Yeah, right. So it was gradual, right? It was gradual.
But steady.
We began this war. Or we didn't begin. Israel began this war, and 2 weeks into the war, in order to prevent Hezbollah and Iran from really starting a second front that is actually invading Israel from the north, the way Hamas invaded Israel in the south, we moved 2 carrier warships off the shore of Lebanon, ready, aimed, and ready to fire, to protect Israel's northern border. Now, it didn't work that well because we didn't engage with Hezbollah as it was firing the rockets, but it was a message to Iran, which is, of course, Hezbollah is simply is kind of like the 5th Brigade of the Iran army. I mean, it's not an independent actor here. It's part of the Iranian military structure and external force. That's where we were in October and November. It's now a year later. Israel is taking out an enemy of the United States. Hezbollah is an enemy of the United States. Hezbollah killed 241.
I'm not sure the Biden administration sees it as an enemy of the United States. I mean, remember in one of the
is it, like a mahjong club? I mean, what do they do? What are they playing bridge? Well,
on your recommendation, this morning I listened to the NPR morning roundup. And
I'm sorry. I apologize.
Well, no,
I apologize
you're
for
right.
subjecting you to it.
It's good to listen to it to get a sense of what people on the other side of the aisle are thinking. And in the middle of the story about this impending ceasefire agreement between Israel and Lebanon /Hezbollah, The NPR correspondent says Hezbollah, which the United States and Israel consider a terrorist organization, comma, goes on. And I was just kind of scratching my head while driving, which is dangerous, and saying to myself, that, and we consider it a terrorist organization, or was it implied in the NPR correspondent that, well, that's what the United States government says officially, and that's what Israel believes, but we don't really trust them anyway. I think the driving fact here is Biden has wanted Israel's wars to end for some time now. Gaza is essentially over, right? Lebanon is more complicated because Hezbollah is a parasite on this supposedly sovereign state of Lebanon. And so you have to deal with the Lebanese government, you have to deal with Hezbollah, and of course, as you say, Iran is back. It actually is in control here. Syria has tender hooks into Lebanon as well. So they're driving for a ceasefire in Lebanon, and they're doing this, by the way, at the same time as they have been sanctioning Israeli individuals in the West Bank, equating them with Palestinian terrorists. So it's not out of mind for me to think that the Biden administration would sanction Israel, would say if the UN decided to pass a resolution demanding a ceasefire, what is Linda Thomas Greenfield going to do? She probably wanted to pass that resolution 6 months ago. So I'm not surprised by this move. I think in the end, though, it still preserves Israel's right to maneuver. I mean, even if Israel agrees to this, and they see rockets creeping up toward the river, the Litani River, I assume they're going to take those rockets out.
But that's what Bibi said. What Bibi's saying is we need to agree to this deal because the language of the deal will mean that we will not be hauled before the Security Council if we do just what you said. Go ahead.
Hezbollah, through certain Lebanese government parties, is saying that is not officially part of the deal. They're saying whatever the U.S. may or may not be telling Israel on the side is not officially in the deal.
Well, then Israel doesn't have to sign the document. Right. I mean, in other words, like the ceasefire is a document, right? Yeah. It's not actually just sort of like an understanding that, it's a handshake. This would be an official UN document signed by the government of Lebanon, by Israel. Hezbollah can't really be a signatory to it since it is not a recognized, legitimate international actor. So it would be, weirdly enough, France. And remember, one interesting wrinkle here is that France was negotiating essentially on behalf of Hezbollah, or as a kind of cutout for Hezbollah, representing its interests at the table. And then when the International Criminal Court announced its intention it said it was seeking arrest warrants for Bibi Netanyahu and former Defense Minister Yoav Gallant, and Emmanuel Macron, the Premier of France, said that France would honor its obligations under the ICC to arrest them should they land on French soil. Bibi Netanyahu said, I am not negotiating with France. France is out of this conversation. Get France away from me. They are now an interested party agreeing to essentially a perversion of international law. How on earth can I take them as a fair negotiating partner? And 72 hours passed, and Macron sort of apologized, and Biden went to Macron and said, you're wrong, and you're wrong to do what you're doing with the ICC. And Macron said, I'm sorry, I don't know what else to do. We signed the Rome Statute, blah, 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 blah. And now France is kind of back in it. But so this is the world in which Israel is operating, which it has literally one friend out of 204 nations on this entire planet. It has one friend. That friend is senile and stupid, and the worst foreign policy. He's the one friend they have until January 20th.
But this is not. This is my question. Actually, is how much of this is a unique lame duck period in our history. I would say, because now it can be said analyses of just how out of it Joe Biden has been and for how long are starting to trickle out. which of course our enemies and our allies are also reading. This is not just for domestic political consumption. And it strikes me that there's a lot, if you look at different, I mean, I've been looking at the domestic policy stuff, but I'm sure this is happening at state too. Look at how people are wrapping things up for this administration. There's suddenly there's a lot of concern about anti-Semitism on college campuses after this recent election from Catherine Lehman, a Department of Education official, both under Biden and previously under Obama, who could care less about any of this and did nothing when she could. So there's a lot of sort of people rearranging deck chairs on the sinking Democratic Party Titanic right now, and some of this has to be an effort by those at state who have always wanted this outcome for Israel to pursue that.
I also think, by the way, I love John's construction. Get France away from me.
Always call France's bluff should be a foreign policy rule. Always.
Yeah. I also think that the Biden administration, yes, has wanted this for a long, has been saying nothing but
elements of the Biden administration.
No, but vocally, Biden himself has been saying nothing but there needs to be a ceasefire now, and for months, and they want to go out one way or another on what they see as a win, on some sort of accomplishment, getting something that they have claimed to be working towards done. It's a bad thing. We all know that. But that's what they want. So if it's going to be either by supporting the UN resolution or forcing Bibi's hand because of that, the threat of the UN resolution, that's what they're going to do. So this makes perfect sense to me from
okay, you remember, the one of the most famous essays of the last 40 years was Daniel Patrick Moynihan's essay published in the American Scholar called Defining Deviancy Down. If you remember, this is about social chaos and how in a world in which people are unwilling to look at true crime, causes of social instability, they start saying that things that once were viewed as deviancies are in fact normal, and you therefore define deviancy down. We are defining peace down, or the Biden administration has spent a year defining peace down and fetishizing the word ceasefire. A ceasefire is not a peace. A ceasefire is by definition a temporary moment in a larger conflict. Perhaps a ceasefire can extend into a peace, though I don't know that one can name a single case in which a ceasefire ended up becoming a peace. Maybe Northern Ireland at some point, but mostly not. And so we fetishize the word ceasefire beginning in December, there was a ceasefire between Israel, or a pause. Israel didn't even want to call it a ceasefire in November when the 80 hostages came out of Gaza over 6 days. But this constant call for a ceasefire, and Israel saying we can't, or ceasefire to get the hostages out with Hamas. 14 ceasefire proposals announced by the United States or designed by the United States, agreed to by Israel, rejected by Hamas. Ceasefire. So now they want to go out on a victory. A ceasefire is not a victory. A ceasefire is not the end to a war. A ceasefire is nothing but the freezing in place of positions in a war where the gunfire stops. So famously, over time, there have been ceasefires around holidays, right? Like during World War I, there was the famous Christmas ceasefire where everybody who was like in the trenches got 2 days off to celebrate Christmas, and then they started murdering each other again. A ceasefire is a momentary thing, and that this is how the Biden administration has degenerated its foreign policy into this fetishization of being able to say, well, at least we got a ceasefire in Lebanon that clearly isn't going to hold. It's 60 days, and Hezbollah is not going to behave. Israel will end up having to do something during the ceasefire to end it, or right on the 61st day after the ceasefire is over. And it's an embarrassment. It is a huge, aside from everything else we can discuss about what it says about America and Biden and the Democratic Party and the State Department and the need to disrupt and destroy all of these, the careers of people who have led to this moment. It is ridiculous on its face to make a ceasefire the be all and end all the modus vivendi of American foreign policy.
Can I say, because it's been a while, so I'm going to give you, and it's worse than that. A ceasefire in this case.
We need a special sound effect
Yeah.
for the, like, we need a kind of trumpet.
No, cowbell. It's got to be a cowbell.
Cowbell, okay.
A ceasefire in this case gives Hezbollah, for the first time, a chance to catch its breath, reconstitute its leadership, maybe supply lines, get itself together after it has been relentlessly bombarded and decimated by Israel for months. A ceasefire is just a total gift to Hezbollah right now. I mean, they couldn't, and you know, Biden made that mistake in an interview when he was talking about a ceasefire between Israel and Hamas. And he said the same thing at some point, and then he said, "Well, forget." He said, "A ceasefire will just allow Hamas to regroup, and but we should go on to other things." This would be a huge boon to Hezbollah at a time of great desperation for it.
Important note: who is the ceasefire for? For whom would the ceasefire be negotiated? It is being negotiated, in Israel's terms, to create the conditions under which those 60,000 Israelis who have been living in temporary shelter elsewhere in the country, including my niece's in-laws, who have a bed and breakfast right near the Lebanese border, who have been living with around her in a sort of on a moshav in the center of Israel with my niece's family. They want to go back home. They can't go back home. It's not safe. So you would think, this is great. Who wants the ceasefire more than the residents of northern Israel who can go home? Well, the largest city near the border is called Kiryat Shmona. Its mayor is a guy named Avihai Stern. And what was his response to the word of the ceasefire? He called it, in a Facebook post, a surrender agreement. When you propose to return us to the reality of October 6th in the north, where our sons could be taken captive, our daughters raped, and our homes burned, we will not agree, we will not return, and we will not cooperate with these surrender agreements. That's the person, the mayor of the town for whom the ceasefire supposedly is being implemented in order to create the conditions under which they can go home. He says it's surrender. He's not saying, oh, thank God, maybe we could build trust. We can have trust exercises and we can find common ground. And Hezbollah, they don't want to get killed. We don't want to get killed. People can go back to living in their homes south of the Litani River, and pacific emotions can break out all over the Middle East. They know that they cannot return to the status quo. Hezbollah cannot be in a position where it can have a safe harbor 18 miles from Israel's border. It can no longer happen. We know that Hezbollah was almost on the verge of invading Israel on October 8th. It did not do so. Instead, it has fired 2,000, 3,000 rockets just yesterday, the day before yesterday. A rocket strike on 12 people were injured in a rocket strike. This happens almost daily. People are still getting, these are rockets that evade Iron Dome or evade the ability because they're low. They fly really, really low because they're so close, and they're not going up and coming down, and they get in and they hit a school building or they hit a house or they hit a town, and they are not going home. I mean, so the ceasefire has no purpose in Israel's terms except to pacify the United States by refusing to allow the United, or doing what it can to make sure that the United States does not advance in its anti-Israel anti-official actions against Israel. Now, a new administration is coming in, but this would establish a new fact on the ground, which is somehow the United States using the Security Council against Israel. And that's where we should need to talk about the parallels to 2016. Go ahead.
A few points. I mean, Hezbollah is definitely not the same organization that it was on October 6th. And obviously, a threat remains. There are rockets, though far fewer rockets that are being launched.
But remember, they have 450,000 projectiles, or they had an estimated 450,000 projectiles before October 7th.
That's right. But it's unclear exactly how much damage has been done. And I assume quite a bit. I mean, even as we're speaking, in the run-up to this ceasefire proposal being authorized, Israel is striking caches in Beirut. And I mean, so I think that a lot of damage has been done to Hezbollah, even though it still exists. So the question is, what is the desired outcome here? Is it some type of security zone that is in southern Lebanon, between the Israel border and the border communities and the Litani River? If so, who is defending that, patrolling that? I mean, according to the agreement, it's going to be UNIFIL, which, as you say, is worse than useless. So that's something to think about. The other political aspect to this, which we should mention, is Trump wants this ceasefire too. Trump wants the Lebanon war over. He went and campaigned in Michigan and appealed mainly to Lebanese Americans living in Michigan. So there's a separation within the Arab American population between the Palestinians who advocate for Gaza and Hamas, like Rashida Tlaib, and Americans of Lebanese descent who have been crusading for some type of
who are
ceasefire.
Primarily Christian, by the way.
Christian,
it's important to point out,
who are
like
Shia, right?
Yeah.
I mean, so they're different. It's a different sect or a different religion altogether. So I think actually, if this were to happen, Trump would be somewhat pleased. On the other hand, it's the 60-day ceasefire leads up right to inauguration.
Right.
So, he doesn't want this to expire and them to go to war again, right as he's
the first week that he's sworn.
Right.
Well, he can be accused of restart of right. Exactly. This is
right.
So those are just two quick observations that I had after listening to you.
Okay, well, let's talk about 2016, because we have this whole question of, is the Biden administration just Obama 3, right? Has it proved to be Obama 3? Is Obama, in Christine's terms, like, since Biden is non compos mentis and has been, there has always been this theory that somehow secretly, mysteriously, conspiratorially, Lee Smith and others, it's like, Obama's actually the president. Obama's really the president. Biden's not the president. Obama would be smarter as president than Biden. So, I mean, he more pernicious in some ways, but at least smarter. I don't see Obama's hand here because this administration is too stupid. But what did Obama do on his way out the door? What was the signature thing he did during the period between Trump's election in 2016 and leaving office on January 20th? He allowed, for the first time, by abstaining, a Security Council resolution uniquely and disgracefully hostile to Israel to be officially signed into UN law, which is to say the UN should no longer exist. I do not recognize its legitimacy. People of goodwill should not recognize its legitimacy, but unfortunately, it has legitimacy as a marker point of international law. And Obama wanted to go out the door kicking Bibi Netanyahu in the balls for having given the speech against him in the Congress in March of 2015 against the Iran deal, and hated Bibi. And this was his petty, slimy, lefty, Rashid Khalidi, I'm coming out of the closet as an actual anti-Israel academic leftist like you always thought I was, but I pretended I wasn't. Last moment of clarity and revelation of his true nature. I don't think this describes Biden, who is not as interesting and not a man of, the boom, is not a boomer really, and is not a man of that generation. And
but yesterday pardoning turkeys. I mean, he's not even, is it clear he's even meeting with his advisors at this point? I mean, I'm not trying to be.
Well, presidents always pardon turkeys, Christine.
Well, I know, but what else is he doing besides pardoning turkeys? I look at his schedule every day. I've seen parties and I'm seeing, social events, but I'm not seeing a lot of even, like, I guess he gets his brief every morning, but I don't think it's conspiratorial to
Well,
say.
they had a dinner last week at the White House where he wanted to thank everybody for the just wonderful work they did in having a failed first single term that will be remembered in history as one of the worst presidencies of all time. So I hope everybody who was there in the room was really, really celebratory about all the great work they did to raise prices 20%, to give Russia the weird green light to
Interesting.
go
Can
into
I
Afghanistan. Yes, please.
say something about that dinner that I noticed reading the pool reports? The dinner was last Friday. It was on the South Lawn. I happened to pass by the South Lawn in the evening. It was quite a tent that they set up. It was really nice. But then reading the pool reports afterward, the First Lady spoke for much longer than the
Yes,
President of the United States.
that's correct.
Because it was late at night, and it was very interesting. She gave like a 15-minute long speech, and then they called President Biden up, and he spoke for 1 or 2 minutes max.
And
that
said,
was
"Don't jump in the pool."
Yeah.
Right. I think the main thing he said, "Don't you all go jump in the pool now."
it was a pretty revealing detail that, of course, only someone who is a lunatic obsessive about politics like myself would notice if you're reading these pool reports that the White House Correspondents Association sends out.
You are not alone, Matt. You are not alone.
John, on this point about Obama and and what he did on heading out of office, you don't have to be conspiratorial. It doesn't have to be Obama pulling the actual strings of the current administration to see his fingerprints on this, just in terms of legacy. But making this thinkable, in some ways preferable for the Democrats by their way of thinking. So he's there. There's a through line that it's unmistakable.
But it's
If Obama hadn't done that and many other things, this wouldn't be happening.
It is the natural through line. It's why Biden's behavior at the beginning of the war was so surprising, because he actually interrupted the Democratic Party's journey on its road to being an almost explicitly anti-Israel party. There was this moment of discontinuity where Biden said, "I have Israel's back. Israel's completely justified in what it's doing. It needs to go and destroy Hamas. I'm going to Israel on a solidarity mission to show Israel how much I support it." And that was jaw-dropping, because that was not behavior that one would have expected from a Democratic administration in the 21st century. And guess what? We're never going to see it again. We will never see it again.
Unless Richie Torres gains power in the Democratic Party.
Well, Richie Torres, the congressman from New York, who is going to run for governor of New York in 2026, and I think likely will win. Maybe, yes, by the time he becomes president, he's a young man, and by the time he became president, perhaps the entire world will have changed such that all of the whip hands that are held by people who feel the genocidal fury, feel that Israel is a genocidal monster and all that, all the geopolitical realities, including advanced fracking, the Abraham Accord, all sorts of things will happen, including maybe the fall of the regime in Iran that will no longer, and Qatar, that will no longer be paying tens of billions of dollars to create the worldwide move against Israel in this kind of a conspiracy of anti-Semitism around the globe. So I'm saying that for the time being, if there is a president in 2028, a Democrat who wins in 2028, that president ain't going to Israel, even if Israel is hit by a nuclear bomb by Iran, because somehow the Democratic Party will find a way to say, well, it's all Israel's fault that Iran nuked Israel because, it never gave the Palestinians a state or whatever. Like, that is where this party is going. See no evidence or indication. We already see how efforts to speak in heterodox terms against the ideas of the Democratic left, particularly the conduct toward Seth Moulton raising questions about boys and girls sports. Seth Moulton is the new Jeff Flake or the new Bob Corker. Like, Seth Moulton is a dead man in that party. I'm sorry. He is not. He is going to be primaried and he is going to lose next year. that is going to be a number one target. $100 million will be raised against him by somebody. They will beat him in a primary and knock him out, because you got to extirpate that dissent right. You got to pull it out right from the root before other people get the idea that this new set of leftist ideas.
My head is spinning. I mean, we went from Richie Torres to becoming president to $100 million spent primarying Seth Moulton to Israel being hit by a nuclear bomb. I mean, let's just take a step back.
I've been watching Taylor Sheridan shows.
I think that's
so
happened.
They're very melodramatic. So I may be in a melodramatic frame of mind, but I didn't expect to hear from the Israeli prime minister that he had to agree to a ceasefire deal because the United States was going to go against Israel at the UN Security Council.
Not disputing his stated reasoning, but don't you think that in an Israeli political context, where he is managing a coalition that includes some very religious and very nationalist parties, it might make the medicine go down a little bit more smoothly if he were to say that we have to accept this because the Americans were threatening not to veto some demand at the UN.
Right? I absolutely do. And Bibi is not above mischaracterizing or, playing an angle to get what he wants with less able politicians who have had him be Lucy with the football in relation to them a billion times since he became a politician in Israel.
But then why would he want this otherwise?
But he doesn't. That's why.
Right.
I mean, the reason that I believe it is that Bibi has no reason to want the ceasefire.
Well,
There's no political
I guess
gain.
My question is, where is the war going? I can see in Gaza, you're destroying Hamas, you're trying to get the hostages back.
Yeah.
With the war in the north, which was always in some ways more strategically important, right? Because Hezbollah was a bigger threat in many ways than Hamas was, despite the Hamas atrocities. I have struggled somewhat to see what is the actual endgame, unless you are essentially going to recreate the buffer zone that existed there for 20 years, in where Israel is occupying parts of southern Lebanon in order to defend Israeli sovereignty.
That is a perfectly fair, larger geostrategic question, and it's too big a question.
Right.
Because what Israel is doing is degrading Hezbollah to the greatest extent possible. It does not want to destroy Hezbollah. It does not believe it has the capability of destroying Hezbollah. So what can it do is degrade Hezbollah's offensive capabilities, destroy as many of its missiles as possible, destroy its command, control, and communications, kill its leaders, and make it clear that they know everything that's going on. They will not relent. They will bomb that neighborhood in Beirut that Hezbollah controls. Every tit for any
crater all its supply routes.
All of that, right? So it's a degradation process. It is not it's not a war in that weird conventional sense in which they have a territorial aim, because they don't want to occupy the area south of the Litani.
Right.
They pulled out, but they can't do nothing. So in that sense, maybe the point is that the deal that Bibi has struck, and if you listen to it carefully, whatever Hezbollah is saying, it says, we're agreeing to a ceasefire deal. If Hezbollah raises its pinky, we reserve our right to drop a 2,000-pound bomb on its head. That pinky's up, the bomb comes down. That if you want that ceasefire, that we agree to. We're not going to stage sneak attacks or, do surprise this or anything like that. But if they breathe, what is it that Don Corleone says in the meeting? If my son should, if he should get a hangnail in his cell, I will blame the people in this room, and that I will not forgive. That's what Bibi is saying, and therefore, if that's the case, then it's not a bad deal per se, because it's a ceasefire that the only way the ceasefire holds is if Hezbollah holds it.
So I would be more confident in the ceasefire holding if that was the message from America.
Right, that we haven't heard a message from, but we don't know what the message from
America needs to say. Okay, this is the agreement. This is going to give 60 days. Maybe some of the people can move back to the north, which to me is partly the goal. But if Hamas makes any move, we will intervene. We will make sure that Hamas pays for that, because this is how we are able to police this ceasefire. Enforcement is always the question with ceasefires. And that when I look at this ceasefire, it seems to me to be making assumptions about the ability of the Lebanese government, which is a shell, and UNIFIL, which is terrible, to enforce something that is agreed to by the parties. That's where I'm skeptical. But I still think, for Bibi's purposes, it might be useful to create some breathing room.
I think look, it is very difficult to explain how hard what has gone on in Israel has been for the Israeli people. I mean, they've never had a war. This war is 4 times longer than any war they've ever fought. It is a small nation.
The drain on the families of the reservists.
Yeah. I mean, I'll just give you, my own family story. I have a nephew and a nephew-in-law, both with small children. My nephew was in Gaza for more than 200 days, was nearly killed in an ambush, had a business that was starting to take off that he essentially had to put into hibernation. My nephew-in-law, also off for hundreds of days, has 2 kids, including a baby who was born on, I don't know, in early mid-October, after October 7th. My niece is, alone with a 3-year-old and a baby much of the time. As I said, she's living with her in-laws, because her in-laws had to abandon their business and home in the north to protect themselves from Hezbollah rockets. The grueling nature of this ongoing conflict, which blessedly took a emotionally positive turn with the success in Gaza, the elimination of Sinwar, the elimination of Hania, the display of technological prowess in the pager operation, in the assassination in Tehran, all of that kind of gave Israel back its sense that it was on the front foot instead of on the back foot. That was all emotionally very important. But I mean, this is an unbelievably difficult challenge for Israelis. And yes, I think a little breathing room, it would be a good thing. And so that's why I say I think the deal, if it is what Bibi says it is, has the advantage of saying, okay, we will, we'll do what we can do. Hezbollah breathes wrong, and we're, that's it. It's all on them. It's all on them.
Except in the event were that to happen, you could see exactly how it would be characterized.
Right.
That Israel violated a ceasefire on the pretense that Hezbollah was moving around weapons or rearming or recruiting or whatever else.
Well, that's what we can't trust the Biden administration to do, right? In the end, that's the thing about these 2 months is, we need to hear from them. We need to hear from them explaining, sorry, guys, I don't know why this thing is making noise. We need to hear from them on what is happening, how we characterize the ceasefire deal, and what they will do to have Israel's back should the ceasefire be violated by Hezbollah. Until we hear that, Bibi's characterization has to stand as the only one that we have. But I don't trust him, and we shouldn't trust him, and there's no reason to trust them. And the party's center of gravity is shifted into this position in which people seem to think, look, the Hezbollah raids on it, what Hezbollah has done, there is no defense for. I mean, look, you can say, you know what, Hamas, the people of Gaza suffering under the Israeli jackboot, they had to explode outward. That is not the story with Hezbollah. Hezbollah is a 40-year resident of, is an Iranian proxy army in southern Lebanon that has no tactical or strategic interest in firing on the north of Israel. None. There is no plan. There is no effort to sort of do whatever. It is simply there as the extension of the Iranian existential threat to Israel, which is why, by the way, to answer Matt, and then we should move on a little bit, but there is no end game in a war with Hezbollah, because the end game in the war with Hezbollah is the war with Iran. Hezbollah is ended as a threat when Iran is ended as a threat. And that's the question of the next decade, is what is the nature of the Iranian threat? How does the world, how does Israel respond to it? How does America respond to it in tandem with Israel? We have an administration coming in where the new incoming Secretary of the Treasury says, let's make America great again and let's make Iran broke again. We have a president who is proud of the fact that he pulled out of the Iran deal. We have a president who says, if you could get rid of the nukes, you should get rid of the nukes. That is the new administration that is coming in. Whether it will lift a finger to do any of that, because Trump is obviously not an interventionist by calling, except economically, is a different story. But
I completely agree, John, and that's why part of me sees this potentially as a bridge to getting an administration that is actually that understands that at the end of the day, Iran is the problem in the region, which of course the Biden people have never really believed, or they've said it more recently, but they haven't acted on it with any type of serious intent. Right. And but that the Trump people do. I mean, when you listen to Mike Waltz, you listen to Rubio, you listen to Dissent. I mean, you listen to Stefanik. I mean, look, and so that, I think, in addition to the type of maximum pressure that the Trump administration will begin,
and Hegseth, by the way, if he makes it through. So we have the entire foreign policy and defense establishment inside, with the exception of Tulsi Gabbard. The entire team believes that Iran is one of the leading world.
She hasn't really said much about Iran lately.
No,
I think she's learning some new lines. This is kind of my suspicion. I think she's a pretty quick study, and she's getting ready to say, "Aloha, senators. Iran is our number one enemy." I mean, anyway. So you have that going in, and then you have the idea that if Israel has to strike Iran again, the Trump administration would be much more, I think, open to allowing a more fulsome response, and perhaps even an assisting in it. And so, in that sense, that you're right. That's the end game. Iran is the end game, but that end game is not going to be achieved in the next 2 months because of the Biden administration's obstreperousness.
Okay, so let's move on to the incoming Trump administration and the announcement made by Trump on Truth Social that it is his intention to slap a 25% tariff on goods coming in from Mexico and, kind of surprisingly, from Canada, which I didn't really expect would be part of the equation here, and a 10% tariff on Chinese goods. Now, the argument here in relation to Mexico and China, but Mexico specifically, is Mexico's flooding our borders with fentanyl, which is killing people and migrants and all of that, and they need to pay a cost. They need to pay for it. We need to put pressure on the government to do what it needs to do to stop this, drug invasion and this, invasion by foot. The Canada thing is kind of thrown in there because I guess we have we have NAFTA, we have the North American Free Trade Agreement, which is America, Canada, and Mexico.
We have USMCA, which replaced NAFTA.
Okay, fair enough. Anyway, so he is blowing that up simply by putting a tariff on Mexico. He's blowing up the USMCA.
Well, he put tariffs on Mexico and Canada before. I think USMCA gives him the ability to do that.
Okay,
but these are much larger than he ever imposed.
That's a honking big tariff.
And Canada, I think it's in for a bruising. I don't really mind.
Look at the smile on Matt's face when he said that.
Canada.
I don't mind when Canada, is telling when police in Montreal are telling rabbis to take off their kippots, and they're arresting journalists for taking.
Look, I'm going to be like the Biden-Harris administration and distinguish between the Canadian people and the Canadian government. So, the Canadian people are nice people. They're very nice and polite people. But that government, I mean, okay, we can 25%. Okay, I can handle that because they've done a lot of bad
Right.
in recent times.
Fair enough. But the rubber is meeting the road. Like, once again,
Like
we're talking
Tuesday
about
here.
an
This is
entirely different.
Sorry.
I don't know. Yeah, we are let loose. Matt is imposing tariffs.
Here's the bottom line. Going after Canada.
I had a bad meal at an Italian restaurant. 30% tariff on Italy.
Sorry.
You know who was mean to me? I had a Lithuanian cab driver.
Well, he does.
Get him
this
out.
Is what he does. Remember when there was a pastor that was being held by Erdogan in Turkey?
That's right.
Yeah.
And Trump always makes it a big thing. He wants to free people, bring them home. And so he told Erdogan that if he didn't release this pastor, then Trump was going to impose these huge tariffs. And I think literally used the words, crush the Turkish economy. Mm-hmm. And guess what? The pastor came home. And he did the same thing with Mexico when the argument over remain in Mexico. It was like, if you don't get this agreement through, I'm going to do these tariffs that will crush your economy. So I see something very similar happening here with these two posts that he released.
Well, he's like a social media TR.
It
right?
is,
he, like,
by the way.
in all caps on Truth Social and carries this tariff stick. And that's how he tries to negotiate. It's very blunt. But he doesn't actually do this.
Well, my favorite part of the truth was the last sentence of the second one where he said, this is the one about China where he's promising a 10% tariff. Right. And at the end of his little statement, he says, thank you for paying attention to this matter. Like, okay, there's always this random phrase. We are. You're Trump. We're paying attention.
We got nothing but attention for your policy proposals.
Thank you for paying attention to this matter.
So two things suggest themselves to me about this. One is that we are now in anti-progressive Teddy Kennedy territory. Right? What did Teddy Roosevelt say? Right? He said, speak softly and carry a big stick. This is exactly the opposite of what Trump does. Trump screams at the top of his lungs, and then, generally speaking, when he implements the policies are more moderate than the rhetoric would have led you to believe. So this is the bully pulpit with an emphasis on the word bully, not and bully, of course, being a
bully
Teddy
social
Roosevelt,
media.
who called another Teddy Roosevelt phrase.
Bully social media.
Yeah. But I mean, that was also it was Teddy Roosevelt who said that the presidency was a bully pulpit, right. Meaning, boy, what a great place to get your views out to the world and preach good things to the world. But so that's one thing, which is that Trump is attempting to make policy through threat, right? Saying do this or we're going to do X, and then maybe Claudia Sheinbaum, the new president of Mexico, or Justin Trudeau, the man who makes Joe Biden look like Albert Einstein, Prime Minister of Canada, or Xi are gonna try to sue for peace in some fashion and give Trump what he wants without Trump actually formally going there. Which
this was Trump's approach to NATO too. Why should I kick in? Yeah. If you guys aren't going to defend yourselves against Russia and so on.
Now, having said all that, tariffs are horrific policy. They've been proven not to work as a matter of long-term, you create trade wars and you destabilize things and you disrupt supply chains and you create inflation. And there's a reason that they are used sparingly, if at all. Unless they're put in place for national security reasons. And so I don't think they work. And I think that Trump is playing with fire. And, while I think we're amused and think that he's fulfilling a campaign promise and presidents should fulfill their campaign promises, this is very nerve-wracking. And it should not be, though it's fun to joke about, like, he will reap the whirlwind if he puts them on and bad things happen. So at least he's putting his money where his mouth is and daring, seeing where
But
that
like
where
I've
that
said before,
goes.
with the tariffs, we just don't know if it's like the wall. It's like this is the moment where he said the wall just got 10 feet higher.
Right. Right. Well, that's I think the hope that we would have is that it's the wall and that he is using
Yeah,
suasion,
right,
not persuasion, but suasion to
right.
get people to do things. Not quite clear what exactly he wants. I mean, he wants Mexico to close the border on its side, to deal with the drug smugglers on its side, to deal with the migrants on its side, to prevent them from coming into the country. What he wants from Canada is not clear. The cost of the tariffs on the
Well,
U.S.
there are
economy.
immigrants and drugs coming from Canada too.
Well, that's what he says. That's what he
Oh,
says in that. Right. Yeah.
I think that's been substantiated.
Right.
I mean,
Okay. So
the border is not. I mean, Stefanik
yeah.
talks about this. Anyone who has a district along the northern border has had concerns about
Right.
what's been going on for some time as well.
Fair enough. Yeah, and her district is right on the Canadian border. Right. It's literally like the Niagara Falls. So I don't think Niagara Falls is in the district, but it's right next to Niagara Falls. So yeah, she knows whereof she speaks. There are very large potential long-term consequences for a tariff on Mexico of this size. A lot of automobile construction takes place south of the border. There are huge auto plants south of the border that make cars that are sold in the United States. This is the largest single consumer good that anybody in America buys is a car. If the price of automobiles goes up as a result of a tariff on Mexico, that is something that the American people are going to shoulder. And we're just coming out of a horrible inflationary period that we're still that has set a new normal for prices higher than they, significantly higher than they were 4 or 5 years ago. And you would think he wouldn't really want to futz with that. I gather from some responses I've had on Twitter from the world of MAGA people that they are now like the people who believe in modern monetary theory. That was the idea that no, it's okay, inflation's fine. Inflation, don't worry about it. Inflation's fine. It's not a big deal, inflation. That was modern monetary theory. That tariffs, Walmart won't raise prices if we put tariffs on things. Because Walmart knows if it raises prices, it will lose customers. So this is a guy named John Carney at Breitbart who actually got into a fight with me on Twitter about this last week. Walmart knows it can't raise prices. What? What are you talking about? Walmart raised prices like everybody else raised prices over the last 4 years because the cost of goods went up, and the cost, therefore, is paid by the consumer who buys them, or it isn't paid at all. Walmart is a consignment business. It sells things. It doesn't buy them. It's a transshipment point. Prices go up 20%. Walmart charges you 20% more.
Yeah, I mean, I think
I don't know how the laws of economics have been suspended just because Donald Trump wants tariffs.
Well, I think that the Trump view is any inflationary effects of the tariffs are counteracted by the rise in investment and productivity in the economy more generally because of the other aspects of his economic agenda. And that is something of what we saw during Trump's first term. I mean, inflation was not an issue. There were tariffs imposed on China during,
but not of this size.
These are larger. There's no question about it. But I think what he's looking at the net effect overall rather than the price level at any for a particular good. Now, look, I'm just giving that view. It's not necessarily my view, and there are effects. The trade wars never, like any war, never go the way that you plan, right? I mean, one of the effects of Trump's initial round of tariffs in China was not to move production to the United States. It was to move production to Vietnam and to Mexico, right? So
India.
You're not necessarily, labor is so expensive here that companies are always going to find some type of alternative to do the arbitrage. And then, of course, even if the inflationary effects are not as pronounced as the 20% increase in the price level that Biden gave us, right, over the past 4 years, which were not from tariffs, it was from the spending, there were consequences in terms of our GDP growth from these tariffs. There are declines in investments. There are losers to tariffs as much as there are winners, and one of the big losers in Trump's first administration was the ag sector. And I think that too, you're going to see some people from farmers saying, hey, already we're seeing this is not what we want to do, because any retaliatory tariffs imposed on American goods will affect, America's the breadbasket of the world. We feed everybody. And so they're not looking forward to that.
My main concern is that even if you believe in the logic that says you put tariffs on to make it more costly, so costly to to export jobs, as they would say, or to move manufacture these places, that they'll just do it here in the United States. And maybe there's logic to that, but that's a 10, 15-year process. That doesn't happen in 6 months. And presidencies, including the Biden presidency, often do things like pass bills that have a goal, like the CHIPS Act has a goal, right? Which is to help create a domestic manufacturing industry for silicon chips and all that. And they pass the bill and then they say they did it and all the jobs have been created. Well, the jobs haven't been created. The plants haven't been built. As it happens, until we find better supply of rare earth minerals and things like that to go into some of these chips, it's not going to be that great a business, and it's going to take 10 years to build anyway. And so whatever benefit you get, it's good to think long-term about these things, but you're going to get the weird disjunction between Trump claiming victories because somebody says, as he did with Caterpillar at the beginning of his administration in 2017, oh, look, I saved all these jobs at Caterpillar. Right. Caterpillar is not going to move its plant out of so-and-so. And then a year later, Caterpillar moved its plant because it suspended what it was doing so that it could get Trump to pat it on the head. But the economics didn't work, no matter what happened there. So I wish, this would be a wonderful system. If it worked in theory. The reason that we don't have tariffs anymore, we don't play tariff games, is that we have 2 centuries of evidence to suggest that tariffs are a self-reinforcing failure, that create more problems than they solve, and that in an effort to create top-down economic growth by government policy, that is actually not what American capitalism worked, because it violated every thought like that forever over the course of the time that it became the most powerful economy. Okay. Christine, we do have interesting stuff, a little bit, then we need to go, but we do have interesting stuff going on inside Trump world as this incredibly efficient transition goes on. All the cabinet picks going, a lot of the secondary picks going, all of that. Susie Wiles seems to be an extraordinarily efficient person, getting choices made, things through, decisions done, all of that. There does seem to be an interesting palace guard. We're already hearing about how people are getting into fistfights on the Mar-a-Lago patio, or shoving each other and stuff like that. Is this just like the alphas are back, baby, and Trump is the ultimate alpha and everyone else is like a neo-alpha, and they're just behaving, instead of pajama boy like behavior in the Obama Biden administrations, they are all strutting like peacocks and showing their full, their plumage.
Well, I think it's actually sort of a little bit of nostalgia of what happened in 2016 when Trump won the first time, right? Suddenly it brought into the orbit of the sort of lifelong political class in DC and the media class in New York, a whole new cast of characters, some of whom I think played their roles really well in terms of providing dramatic fodder and completely out of control behavior. But the scandal du jour, or potential scandal, is that Boris Epstein, is that how we pronounce his name? Epstein has evidently, he's being accused of asking for money from people who were seeking cabinet.
Yeah, Epstein. Yeah,
seeking money from people who were trying to find positions in the new administration. So whether this is true, we don't know if this is true. This is an accusation, but he has obviously upset a lot of people already within Trump world, where there are, as you say, various factions. So I'm just simply enjoying it for the drama of, there's always these transition dramas but when it's Trump, it's a little more circus-like in its atmosphere. So we'll see how this pans out. But he's got the cardinal sin that Epstein's being accused of is that he's trying to make money off of Trump. And as we've discussed many times, the only person who makes money off of Trump, as Matt said before we came online, is Trump. So this might be the one bit of behavior, not the punching or the slap fights at Mar-a-Lago, but trying to make money off Trump might be the one thing that gets you ejected from Trump world.
So he's selling Trump indulgences.
Exactly.
This, of course, is what created one of the things that created Protestantism was the effort to sell favors, sell access. Trump is the only reason that Epstein is still in the game. Trump likes Epstein. Nobody else seems to like Epstein. He's literally gotten into fights with Scott Bessent, the Treasury Secretary, Howard Lutnick, the incoming Commerce Secretary, and somebody else. Like the stories have come out, like he is like walking around Mar-a-Lago, shoving people and punching people. I don't know what the hell else is going on. It is kind of funny. I mean, it's usually this happens when someone sneaks behind somebody's back to call Maggie Haberman to say so-and-so is being mean to me, or Trump threw a plate of spaghetti against the wall or something like that, just to get their yayas out. Boris is like out there up front using physical physical threats or something like that. I think we've probably seen the back of him. I don't think he survives this, whatever it means for him to survive things. No one is ever really fully out of the Trump orbit if Trump likes them, but still, we need a little comic relief in the world in which I know half the people are saying.
Well, there's Matt Gaetz selling cameos.
Yeah, well, he's going to go on OnlyFans. When he goes on OnlyFans, let me know.
Might as well, yeah.
That's all I want to say. Abe, you have a commentary recommends.
I do. I saw a new movie called A Different Man. It stars Sebastian Stan, the British actor Adam Pearson, who has neurofibromatosis, which is a condition whereby you have all sorts of tumors growing throughout your nervous system and on your body. And Norwegian actress named Renate Reinsve. I don't know how to pronounce it, so I'm going to go with Renate Reinsve.
It's the star of a great movie called The Worst Person in the World, which came out 3 or 4 years ago. One of the best young person's movies of the last decade. Or Renate Reinsve, yeah. Anyway,
I'm going with Renate Reinsve.
Okay,
and so it's a little the movie A Different Man is an odd, small, dark comedy drama, and it's going to be hard to describe because I don't want to do what terrible movie trailers do, which is sort of tell you way too much so that you're not interested in seeing it. So I'm going to be a little vague about what's going on, but Sebastian Stan plays someone with that condition. But he plays someone. His character is someone who his face is sort of covered in tumors, and he's an actor of sorts who seems to only primarily act in like public service films about disability, things like that. And then Renata, her character is a playwright who moves into the apartment next to him, and she's attractive. She takes some interest in him, and they develop kind of a friendship, but it gets a little awkward at points. And Sebastian Stan's character is presented by his doctor with some new treatment that can cure his condition entirely. And he takes the doctor up on it, and he's cured. He becomes very handsome, and all the tumors are gone, and he essentially puts his old life to death and becomes a different man, as the title says, and he goes on to other areas. He's no longer an actor exactly, although that comes up again. And then the Adam Pearson character comes into all their lives. Someone who is suffering from the condition that the Sebastian Stan character had suffered from, and sort of shows him up and is this magnificent figure that completely confounds Sebastian Stan's character now that he's no longer disfigured by this condition. And it's very funny, and it's particularly good at not at all being pitying about the disabilities and the Adam Pearson character and the condition. In fact, it's quite the opposite, and it is about ultimately sort of triumphing with the hand you've been given. And it's a very funny, great, dark, goes to very dark places. Odd little movie. And I left out some things because I really it's an odd enough movie that you're not sure where it's going, so I don't want to tell you where it's going.
You watched this on PVOD on
I rented it on Amazon Prime.
Right. Okay. So yeah. So it's so that's a different man. Sebastian Stan, known to people as the Winter Soldier in the Marvel movies. Bucky Barnes, really quite a superb actor who has not.
And Donald Trump.
Really, and Donald Trump in The Apprentice, a movie I've not seen. However, our colleague Stephanie Roberts saw it and was blown away by him, and Jeremy Strong from Succession, who plays Roy Cohn. Anyway, so that's a different man. You can rent it on probably
Amazon Prime
or anywhere they do that PVOD pay VOD, and great. So we will be back tomorrow for our again final show before the Thanksgiving break. You may have noted at a point here in the proceedings that Christine vanished from our screens and then returned to our screens. This is our new, if you are watching on YouTube, this is our new system. And Christine's internet went out and then it came back in and she was able to come back in. And so how much fun was that, really? It's like a special effect. She popped in like Samantha from Bewitched after having disappeared from our screens. It's really mysterious and wonderful. So I hope you enjoyed that little.
It's great to have her back.
It's great to have her back.
Thought we lost her there, but then she came back.
And then she came back.
That was reassuring.
Yes. So till tomorrow for Abe, Matt, and the absent and then present Christine, I'm John Podhoretz. Keep the candle burning.